Hello, I'm Michelle Leduc Catlin. Welcome to episode 10, the season finale of season 2 of Trued Up, the podcast that invites you to be the change. In the before times, I'm not sure I ever had occasion to think about the governing bodies that regulate doctors. Having spent years learning how to heal myself, I understood that physicians are trained in a particular paradigm that does well with trauma and not so well with health and well being. But I trusted my medical doctor to at least adhere to her oath and medical ethics. All that changed during the COVID years as a political agenda pushed the pandemic narrative with all its contradictions and lies. The media kept the public in line by fear-mongering and perpetuating the untrue story that hospitals were crowded with COVID patients. But it was organizations like the CPSO, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, as well as other provincial governing bodies, that kept the doctors in line. Well, most of them. There were those who could not go along, who could not ignore the research, their ethics, or their own eyes. Dr. Rochagné Kilian is one such doctor, and her story will shock you. It should also outrage you, and then I hope it will inspire you. It is for all these reasons that she is my guest today on Trued Up. Please bear with the occasional background noise. Dr. Kilian was on the road to her new home in Alberta during our conversation. Okay, so I want to start at the very beginning, but first I just have to say it's always so lovely to see you and to speak to you.
Thank you, Michelle. We always say we do voice notes. Maybe this is too much information. We do voice notes to each other. And if we haven't spoken to each other in a long time, we always start to say, I just love hearing your voice. So it's a pleasure to be here for sure.
Oh, it's so wonderful. And that's all true.
Absolutely.
So I want to start from the beginning. I want to start because you have such an incredible story. You were born and raised in South Africa. So right there, for Canadians, that's, already exotic and intriguing. I just want to start with what you think what did that upbringing in that place at that time provide for you?
Absolutely. I think with the new Lion King that just came out, everybody's on the whole Africa train at the moment. But yes, I think once you're from a continent like Africa, there's just a different way of viewing life in general, where I think a lot of times we'll get to the politics because obviously you can't speak about South Africa and Africa in general without speaking about politics. But the biggest thing I think is that we live so close to our faith in the continent of Africa because you kind of need that because your security and your safety is always dependent on that as well. So I think that has made a massive difference. And then, yes, I'm from South Africa, but I'm also from a culture known as the Boer culture, so Boer, which has been translated as farmer, but it's not. It's a name, and people would remember the Anglo-Boer War, but it's the Boer culture. And in our culture, once again, our faith as well as old conservative values are so important. So obviously that has formed me to who I am today. And that's the way we raise our kids. We've been in Canada now a total of probably 11 years, 7 years with children, but we still raise them in our home language, which is Afrikaans. We all hold the old Boer traditions in our homes. So that still remains so important. And I do think that has played a massive role in the part that I played in the story in the last couple of years as well.
What has been, and we'll of course get to that.
Yeah.
What has been your experience for the difference in adjusting to Canadian culture?
Oh, I'm going to be very honest with this interview. So the last couple of years have definitely not given us the best overview, I think, of the Canadian culture. And we'll get to the part that we relocated out of Ontario soon. So we're hoping our attitude is going to change a little bit. But to be very frank, what we've said in the last 7 years or so being in Canada is that we really don't know if Canadians have a culture. which is problematic in itself as well. And we understand the value of assimilation and all of these different minglings of things, but there's always something that we found lacking in that depth of culture in Canadians. And I don't know, we've tried to figure it out. Is it the way that Canada started because it was just a bunch of trappers, it was more trade related, versus relocating for a specific survival religion? A lot of the places like South Africa, like the States, there was a bigger ideology behind relocating to that continent. Where with Canada, I think a lot of it was trade related. So we don't know if it was that, or if Canadians have lost something in the last 23, 30 years, that maybe there was a Canadian culture and we were just never privileged enough to get to know that part of Canada. But that's been the toughest part. We were in British Columbia for 4 years before moving back to South Africa. And then when we came the second time around, it was in Ontario. And even those provinces, yes, there's a big difference in culture, in just lifestyle and how they view life. But that depth of culture we couldn't see in either of those. Cat's out of the bag. We're now in Alberta, so we're now experiencing Albertans. We've been here for just over a week, and there's definitely a massive difference so far. We're still getting to know the people. Obviously, it's just very new, but there's a massive change in just what they project from the outside, with us really getting into the deeper values of what people hold here. But it's been so different already. So I wonder, if you ask me this in a year, if my answer might be a little bit different, to be honest.
It's so interesting because you have a rare experience. Most Canadians, I don't think, have that experience of living in three very different Canadian cultures. I mean, I've traveled across the country and I have a sense, certainly. But what would you say distinguishes Alberta? Because it's in this time, it's becoming a very interesting place to consider.
Absolutely.
What do you see distinguishes Albertan culture from what you've seen of the rest of Canada?
Well, as I said, we haven't been here long, but what we've seen so far is that there's definitely a similarity to the Americans. I grew up in the States for about 5 years between the age of 10 and 15, so I got to know the American culture a little bit better. And there's definitely a similarity between the two. And I think it's just what we've experienced is there's a genuineness when they meet you. It's that authenticity when they meet you where they really look like they want to greet you. There's a friendliness to it. Um, but we know for a fact that the conservative values, especially in this area that we're in at this moment, there is definitely more leaning towards conservative ideology. And maybe that makes a difference because in Ontario, there's definitely leaning more towards the liberal way of seeing life, which I know can be a topic on its own. Liberal is not what liberal used to be, and conservative isn't really what it used to be either. But there's a deep rooted sense of conservative values and focus on family and just living a good life where you take accountability for your own family. And that's what we've seen. The couple of families that we've met here, even just because we're in an RV park at this moment, the kids that our kids have played with is so much more similar to the way we raise them versus some of the places that we were in Ontario.
That's so interesting. I love getting I mean, you probably have a more, well, we all have subjective opinions, but it's a little more, bird's eye view than the average Canadian, right? Because you are coming from the outside and looking in. What is it that had you come to Canada in the first place?
So when Aubrey and we met at university, first year of university. So we're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So it's been a long time. He's known me longer than what I was alive before we met. But when we were in university, he was studying law, I was studying medicine. And when I finished, he transitioned into politics and he went into law part time. So it took a little bit longer to finish. And he told me, after I finish, I can pick anywhere in the world to go and work. We'll do the whole traveling before we do kids, make some money. And the idea was always to return to South Africa. And at that stage, I like the sun too much for me to have ever considered anything in England or the UK, to be very honest. There were so many expats in England, but at that stage, this was in 2009. Canada was a very good option in the sense of the lifestyle that you can have here. They were definitely recruiting a lot. There's always a shortage of physicians in Canada. And at that stage, we said, well, why don't we pick Canada? We can travel to the US very easily. Just because I knew the US much better, we thought it was an easy way for us to travel. So that was in 2009. And we came over. I was recruited to a town in British Columbia, Williams Lake. And we worked there for a couple of years, had a great time. This was always call it BC, British Columbia, but also before children. So it was our era where we could travel. We had a couple of pets, and really just enjoyed the possibility of making enough income so that you can see the world. So we traveled a little bit. But the idea was always to take that worldview and finances and take it back to South Africa, because our culture and our people was always, they were important enough for us to say, we're going to experience this. But also, as you just said, coming in with a overview, kind of a bird's eye view of your own culture, I think that is also added a different layer, because when we went back to South Africa, we were out of the country for 4 or 5 years. So we could step in with more of an objective view to say, what is really going on the ground? What is going on in our culture, the different cultures, the politics? So we stepped back with a very positive attitude to say, what we've learned and what we've experienced, we're going to bring it back and bring it into our own culture and build into our people. So we went back to the area that Aubrey is from in South Africa. A couple of years went past. We had children. We had some infertility issues first, but we had children naturally, a blessing from above. But at that stage, the South African environment got to such a point that it was no longer safe for us to be in South Africa, which is sad to say from your own country. Because we hold our country and our values and our culture so dear, we had to make a decision at that point to say, are we going to live this way? Are we going to surround ourselves with electric fencing and sleep with guns under our pillow and go for training to know what happens when there's a home invasion? So I know this is very relevant with what's going on in the discussions with the refugees. So at that stage, I got recruited. We reached out to a company, Can-Am, and I sent in my resume. And within the first 24 hours, the CEO of this company said, listen here, we've got a position in Ontario. We know you're perfect for this. It's a stroke referral center. And we said, well, that's the answer. And we did it again for the second time, but this time with 2 children. So Canada, at the beginning, to answer your question, was really just a lifestyle choice. The second time around, I think it was because we knew the environment. We kind of knew what we were expecting. It was an easy decision to immigrate again. And at that stage, I've written all of the exams. I wouldn't have gone to anywhere else. But it's been tough in the sense of, obviously, the last couple of years. We can always get into that, but the climate has been tough the longer we're here. Our little African skins miss the sun, so it's been, especially the winters, has been really, really tough, and it's getting worse, I think.
So, you were talking about BC, so let's talk about before COVID.
Yeah. There we go. BC can be for many things.
So, tell me what your practice was like, and then I'd like you to get into I know it's an incredible story, and I know you've probably told it 1,000 times, but of course, we need to hear your story because it's an incredible story. So, before COVID, and then what happened?
Absolutely. So yeah, my specialty in South Africa, our training is a little bit different. When you qualify as an MBCHB, a physician, an MD, as they say here, you are really qualified as a family physician, a little bit of a surgeon, an anesthetist, pediatrics, plastic surgery. You kind of do a little bit of everything in your training, and then you decide if you want to super specialize with something. So when I finished, I was a family physician, did a lot of assisting in surgery. I loved the surgery part of it. If I didn't have a family, surgery would have been one of my passions to go into. And I always enjoyed the emergency department, the trauma, I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I think that kind of just fueled that part of my personality. So when I relocated to Canada the first time, I was a full-time family physician, but also did emergency and room shifts as well as assisting in the operating room. And then I decided, after working in Canada with family medicine for a couple of years, I decided that I'm going to specialize in emergency medicine. I enjoyed that so much. And it also became a little bit of a ideological discussion in my mind to say some of the things that I knew we were doing as a family physician I wouldn't do with my own family and I wouldn't recommend for myself or my children. So I sat with this ethical dilemma to say, I'm not going to sit in an office all day, make very good money, but prescribe things that I know I wouldn't even be taking. So it was an easier transition into the emergency department. And since then, that's basically what I was doing full time before COVID hit, when I was recruited to Ontario, in Owen Sound. It was an emergency department, was also a stroke referral center. So it was a little bit of a busier emergency department. And I loved what I did. I really loved my job. I got along with all of my colleagues. I'm a little bit of a night owl. So obviously, having somebody in part of the department that loves doing night shifts, you're always popular because nobody loves night shifts. I liked being in control. They always say during the day in a hospital, there's just too many chefs in the kitchen, where at night, it's like a skeleton crew and you know exactly, you've got your finger on the pulse, you know exactly what's going on. So I loved that. And then COVID came, obviously, things changed. So at that stage, I was working full time during the pandemic, frontline as they called it. They put up little rocks of thank you outside of the hospital. You remember how that time was, the heroes in their capes. It sounds so ridiculous thinking back. It's been more than 4 years now, but in that period, I kept on asking questions, and I think that's where my story starts, is always asking the questions. Don't just assume what you're being told is the truth. And that's the way we actually raise our kids as well. There's two things. Critical thinking is a massive thing that we focus on. Always remember to have your critical thinking hat on. And then the second thing is value determination. So when you make these decisions, it has to be linked to something. Is this of value for you? Is it of something of value to the community? And play that against each other. So during that period, it was very quiet in the hospital. And I mean, this has been said many times over in a lot of these podcasts. What they were being told outside was not the same in the hospital. But during that period, I had a lot of time to read. I had a lot of time to look up to see what was going on outside of Canada, what was going on in China. And I just kind of immersed myself in all of this data, and what I was reading and what I was seeing was not the same that was being discussed with my colleagues next to me that was just watching CNN and CBC. So that's kind of where you could feel there's a little cracks in the seam of just your collegiality between colleagues as well. And I just kept on asking questions to say, listen, are we doing the right thing? Are we implementing all of the protocols that we could? Could we be including vitamin C? So yes, it started way back. Could we giving people vitamin C when they're admitted? And at that stage, it was November of 2021, I believe, that we haven't even seen one COVID patient at that stage. So it was, no, this was 2020, November of 2020. We haven't even seen one COVID patient. And then everything happened as everybody knew. The vaccine mandates came out. Everybody was so happy about the warp speed projects being rolled out, and anything that happens with speed in medicine, people would have to ask themselves: has all of the boxes been checked properly? Even if you're acting in a way of, yes, we're in a dire situation, we're in an emergency situation. And I think that's where the second divide and cracks became very prominent, even just between myself and colleagues. And I think that's where the process started with my regulatory body, is when we're in an uncertain situation, which all of us was, yes, obviously, there's certain principles that we have to fall back on, and that's medical ethics. If the science is never settled, the facts are never settled because somebody can be in control of the facts. The data is even settled because there's not enough time to analyze the data coming in. But there's one thing that we are always sure of, and what we always should be sure of, and that's medical ethics. The principles of medical ethics have been around for thousands of years. And for me, it's not a far stretch because I find that my faith is so intertwined with the way I live my life that it's just an extension, or medical ethics is just an extension of that. So it wasn't two different hats that I had to put on. And at that stage, what I saw was that every single principle of medical ethics were just violated as terribly as you can imagine. And we all know the stories of how that happened. And at that stage, in August of 2021, we had a vaccine mandate stepping in our hospital, and we had a public recorded town hall meeting, and we can always link that underneath here, where I just asked our CEO certain questions on medical ethics and just basically procedural rollout of certain mandates. And the CEO was not prepared at all for for me in this meeting, and he wasn't able to answer my questions. And in fact, really, the bully tactics and all of these propaganda came out very strongly in this town hall meeting. So it's a good one to watch. I think it's about 15 or 20 minutes max.
I want
And
to.
at that stage, I'd resigned publicly in this town hall meeting.
What are you called to do? And what gets in your way? There was a time when I was self sabotaging my own goals, my dreams, so much so that I ended up with chronic fatigue and unable to work for 7 years. Have you ever had a time when you wanted to do something to produce better results in a particular area of your life, but you just couldn't seem to get past a certain point? We all have a tendency to self sabotage, whether it's with our health, our career, our relationships, or our finances. Maybe you're experiencing that now. And I want to tell you that it's not your fault. We are bombarded with programming that is designed to keep us weak, dependent, sick, and broke. And as someone who has been weak, dependent, sick, and broke, I can tell you that you don't have to stay there. As a certified self sabotage coach, I work with clients one on one to distinguish their unique sabotaging patterns and habits and teach you how to reprogram for success in any area of life. If this sounds like something that you'd like to explore, email me for a free discovery call to see if we're a fit. It's Michelle, with two L's and an E, at gatheryourwits.com. And now back to some empowering programming. Okay. I want to ask you something before you go on,
Yes.
because it's, we've gotten so acclimatized to the lack of ethics, to the corruption, that there's some things we just kind of go, oh yeah. But I have this hope. It may be, far-fetched, that somebody at some point will watch this and actually see something they haven't seen before. So I want to underscore this because I want to underscore this idea that ethics were out the window, and it wasn't just medical ethics. As I remember Dr. Daniel Nagassi said, ethics are ethics,
Yeah.
medical or otherwise, and they were out the window. Can you give us an example of a medical ethic that was breached, just so people really get this?
Mhm. Um, well, first off, Michelle, a lot of times we were told that people didn't have a choice because we were acting in the better, for the better for the community. But we need to understand that, I mean, even our ethics classes, I don't know if it's different in Africa versus here, it was always discussions because it's never black and white. It's always a gray situation. Every situation can be gray because everybody can bring up a point, but there's certain principles underneath that should never be gray. That is frankly black and white. And one of those is informed consent. We've heard a lot about it, but basically, informed consent means out of the patient's point of view, not the professor telling you about what informed consent is. Basically, what it comes down is you as a person, a autonomous sovereign person, or a patient, means that you had enough information in front of you that you could understand to say, this is the information. I know my body best. Nobody knows my body as well as I do. I understand what they're telling me. I know my history. I know what I can handle at this moment. And I'm doing, once again, it comes back to value determination and critical thinking. I am making a decision that the risk is higher than the benefit at this moment. You cannot do a risk benefit ratio analysis without informed consent, which means you need the data. Even though the data that comes in is limited, that person knows exactly what he needs or she needs to make a decision. And that's the first step that was just basically decimated. They were told, people that watched mainstream media or even went to public health physicians, that because of this dire emergency situation that the whole globe is under, you lose that autonomy to make that decision. Because public health officials, science round tables, were making these decisions out of an epidemiological sense, and they were running these formulas and modules that was not real life. So it's theoretical medicine and theoretical formulas that's trying to imprint in real life and clinical medicine. And that's where the big divide was as well. Clinical medicine, what we saw on the front line versus what they were saying. The second one is the bodily autonomy. So even though we've got the data, this is safe, it's effective, that person always has the option to refuse as well. And it comes down to the sovereignty of every single person's body. Once we lose that, then it's not a medical issue anymore. It becomes a societal, a human issue. Where do we draw the line between the individual rights and sovereign rights versus the good of the community? Then it comes into discussions of communism and fascism and all of these things. But if we stay out of it and just remain to say every single person, every single parent had the right to decide for their child, because if the child is not in the public health sphere, they're in your home, they're in the private, they belong to you until they are of age. Those are the principles that was just trampled on from the start. The problem is they got away with so many of these violations because it was public health said we can do this, but public health said we're not having a mandate. We're expecting you to have a mandate. So it was this throwing around of words, and nobody was sure which sections you were supposed to follow, which you weren't. You just need to have a mandate at your club. We ran a private club, a jiu-jitsu dojo, and we had a mandate. Aubrey had a whole protocol written down, and we could decide what happened in this club. But people did not read for themselves all of these regulations and bylaws that came out. So once again, critical thinking was just stepped away from because people were afraid. And I understand once you're afraid of something, it's some of that parts of your brain get switched off. But eventually you had to get to a point where you say, okay, we're still alive. It's not a nuclear bomb that fell down. Let's just sit down and quietly think about what's going on and what decisions I have to make for myself as well as for my family.
It's so rich what you just said. And so obvious. Unfortunately, so much seems obvious, except to the people who were, frozen and into fear-based decisions that were not in their best interest. Um,
Absolutely.
so what happened to you after you were fired?
So after I fired myself, I resigned publicly on this town hall meeting, and I publicly stated I revoked my own privileges at this hospital because I knew they were going to fire me eventually anyway. But I wanted to make a stand and say I'm not willing to continue with this mandate. I'm not going to condone these violations of medical ethics anymore. So I have to step away. And obviously, understanding there's financial implications of that. But in my mind, I figured I would step away from the emergency department. You had to have the shots to work in a hospital, but I'll transition into family practice again. It's something that I've done for a long time. And at that stage, obviously, this town hall recording went viral. I started working with some of the organizations, CCCA. We did a presentation for them where I just took some of the information and data that I've been had a lot of time in the emergency department to do, and I analyzed that and I did a presentation for them on the D-dimer issue and what I was seeing in my patients in the emergency department when they had the shots, what they came in with, kind of all of these complex things just starting at the end of 2020, middle part of 2021, towards the end August when I resigned, where it was becoming really stressful to work in an emergency department setting because we were seeing things that we've never been seeing. So I did that presentation. That kind of went viral as well through the CCCA. They did a beautiful job of doing that presentation or editing. And I think that put me a little bit on the radar of the college. In that process, I transitioned to work with a company out of British Columbia that was providing administrative services, kind of the front end administration for people that wanted exemptions. So I know it's been a long time, but if people remember, because of these mandates stepping in, you had to get the shot. You had no choice except if you had a medical exemption, and some places accepted religious exemptions. So I ended up assessing patients to say, do you have a valid reason not to receive the vaccine? And some of my patients, some of them were like 3 days old. and some of them were 99 years old. So it was a range of patients. Just pausing for a moment to think that a parent had to come and see me for their 3-day-old newborn baby to request an exemption. If that is not concerning to anybody, I think we have bigger problems here already. Because at that stage, they were just pushing the vaccines, they were decreasing the age of who had to get these vaccines or biologics to get into any establishment or to continue your training, your schooling, to go to daycare, all of these things. The age just kept on dropping and dropping. And at that stage, I think it was 6 months. The cutoff might have been 6 months at that stage. So their parents were so afraid that somebody's going to take their newborn baby out of their arms and force a unknown biologic into their arms that they had to come and see me. So I ended up doing this, and one of these exemptions was handed into the college, not by my patient, but an employer of this patient handed into the college under a complaint, and there were some anonymous emails that was sent to say you should probably look at your physician over here in Grey Bruce County, because she was speaking at anti-vaccine rallies. That was the two things that came in kind of at around the same time. The college opened up an investigation without reaching out to me. I was not aware of that. They didn't ask me, listener, did you assess this patient? I would have said, yes, I did. You can ask the patient if they were happy with my service. You can ask the patient if you want to take a look at the file and assess the consultation process that went into providing this exemption to the patient. That's not what they did at all. They sent me a letter at that stage saying that they want a list of all of my patients that I assessed for either vaccine exemptions, mask exemptions, testing exemptions, as well as ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine prescriptions. So it was a list of things that they wanted. Not the one exemption for a vaccine that they received, but it's basically the same thing that a lot of these physicians that was under the spotlight with the regulatory bodies. It's kind of a standard thing, witch hunt, to say, well, now we want everything. And luckily, I'm married to a very brilliant lawyer, also a medical ethicist. And we said, well, this seems a little bit strange. Let's just answer back to say we're willing to cooperate. I've never had issues with any regulatory body anywhere in the world. I've never had any patient complaint with the grace from above. But this seems strange. So let's just step back a moment and say, okay, we're willing to cooperate, but we can't just provide all of these information you're asking just merely for you asking. We need to get the permission of the patients, because I am just a custodian of their medical files. And if they didn't break that fiduciary relationship between the two of us, then I need to get their permission to hand over their files. Obviously, the college didn't agree, because that's not how they've been doing things in Canada for 20 plus years. And they ended up taking me to court. Oh, in that same letter, we said we're willing to give redacted files. So we're protecting the patient's data, but you can still assess my quality of work. If that's the issue, if you're worried that my quality of standard of competency was the issue here, take a look at my files. They weren't willing to do that, because the allegation that they put out in the public was that I was handing out exemptions like candy to anybody that asked, and I charged them $800, which was not the truth. I got $80 per person that I assessed for this, which is below standard what I should have received for my time. And at that stage, they took me to court in December of 2021. And that's where the whole story started. We were in court for more than 3 years. We pushed it all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. And eventually we lost. They denied our access to the Supreme Court. And at that stage, the court system told me that I have to hand over my files. So November of last year, I handed over 519 files of patients, not redacted. They still didn't want me to hand it over to the college, but they had no way of protecting their own files, and I had to hand it over. But 2 months after they took me to court to gain access to these files, they filed a second complaint, and the second complaint was for me not complying or cooperating with the first one. So that second one has gone through the process, and we've gone through tribunal, and they actually found me guilty of professional misconduct, I think on January of this year. But the biggest part that people need to understand, when they found out that I was not going to just give them whatever they asked, because they thought that's how it works and we can just forget about administrative process and medical ethics, they temporarily suspended on their website. It said temporarily suspended my license in October of 2021. So I have been without a license for more than 3 years now, and they only found me guilty of professional misconduct in January of this year. But the professional misconduct was for not complying with the first. It was nothing about the case at all. Yeah, and then you're welcome to ask, because obviously there's a lot there.
So I just want to recap that because I'm trying to like keep my blood from boiling.
Yeah.
I knew your story, but I'm listening to you tell it, and I'm listening from the perspective of how many unethical things happened along the way. And do Canadians, can they even imagine? Can they even imagine that a physician, never mind one of your quality, would be prevented from working when we have a shortage of physicians for nothing? Not a complaint from a patient, but some random anonymous complaint about you doing something that actually is not doing any harm at all.
Absolutely.
So,
That's it.
and that any stranger, anybody with a grudge to bear against somebody can just anonymously put in some kind of complaint and ruin not only the career of someone doing excellent work, but their ability to make a difference for an entire community. I mean, it's just like, my head's just kind of exploding as I listen to the whole thing. And then the fact that this regulatory body, first of all, would pursue it,
Mhm.
knowing that you have patients who love you, who are completely satisfied with your work, who didn't want their own records disclosed. You're trying to honor the physician patient relationship, which is ethical, which they have a right to. They have a right to that privacy. You offer to comply. You offer to do it by redacting their names. And
Yes.
still, they then bring another charge. I mean, the whole thing is so farcical and so unbelievable that if it was written into a book or a TV show, nobody would believe it. See, well,
And I
that's
think that's unfortunately, obviously, there's been financial implications because of my decision, but I wouldn't make any other decision in all honesty. Um, but I think that's where the CPSO, so this is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, I think they weren't ready for the fact that I was willing to take it all the way. Because what has happened in the past, they've played these games with physicians before, physicians that acted independent, were told we're independent, and we're self-regulating, but it's just words. It doesn't mean anything. Once you sign up to be licensed by them and paid by OHIP, you play by their rules or else. So what has happened in the past, they've found these physicians that are recommending things that are not part of the mainstream media or seems alternative, and they find some way to go after these physicians, and these are the tactics that they usually use, and they usually get away with it. The thing with my case, because we kept on pushing it and we kept on standing on the fact that no, I was acting ethical, and the procedures that, or the procedural steps that they followed, they did not have reasonable and probable grounds to even start this investigation. That's what I was blessed to have a lawyer. Rocco Galati took my case on right in the beginning, and he became sick and he handed over to one of his friends, Paul Solansky. And a shout out to Paul. He has done an amazing, amazing job with this case, because I think he was smart enough to realize the importance of this case and to take me out of the picture. It's not even me, it's the case. The case law or the facts in this case was so important that he said yes, he's willing to take it on. And he's been working pro bono for more than 3 years on this case. So we're so grateful for the time and effort that he's put into it. But what has come out of this case is the fact that Canadians need to realize that the regulatory bodies are not there for their protection, because that was the illusion that was there. And I think this case kind of broke that illusion, because there was at least 40 patients out of the 519 that ended up getting their own lawyer that tried to act as interveners in the court. And they were denied standing every single step of the way. And in one of these filings, or the court, what are they called? Court declarations that came out, it said Canadian citizens have no expectation of privacy as it relates to their medical files and the regulatory bodies, which should be concerning to most Canadians. So we've known that, but this is one of those cases that actually puts it in writing so that people can make that decision to say, once I see a licensed physician in public health, I need to realize I'm giving up my rights for privacy and confidentiality. So at least when people know that, once again, they can make that decision. Am I willing to give up those rights because I want the services, which I'm fine with? We need both systems. But people need to be aware of what they're giving up to be able to access those services. And this is one of those things in the case. The next one is I think the college was not prepared for a physician that was willing to lose it all. We're going to be filing for bankruptcy. And I think it's always that physicians fight it as best as they can, but eventually they get to a point where they say, well, I'm going to lose everything. I can't even feed my family. I have to now come to an agreement or comply or agree the fact that I was wrong throughout all of this, which unfortunately happened with a lot of the physicians. And they weren't ready for the fact that I'm not willing to do that. We said this is, once we made that ethical decision, we're seeing this through all the way because there's no other way to do this.
I have to ask you about the other physicians because, your case and the case of Mark Trozy and other physicians have really tarnished my view of the entire profession. Um, and I'm very suspicious. And I don't
Absolutely.
want to, paint everyone with the same brushstroke. If I mangled that, but I don't want to judge everybody the same way. In fact, I went without a physician. Mine retired during COVID, which I think is to her credit.
Yeah.
Um,
She
so
probably saw the writing on the wall.
we had a very awkward conversation when she offered me the shot. Um, and I said, well, remember I got that thing? I was in the UK. I got that thing, that really bad respiratory infection, so I think I've got natural immunity. And there was this kind of blank, well, they're recommending it anyway. They, and to her credit, after a long, awkward pause between us, she said, well, it's your body. So you need
Good.
to be comfortable. So at least there was that. And she did retire shortly thereafter. But so I just got a new physician, and I was kind of quizzing him, and he seems pretty copacetic. He's young. And I
Good.
wonder, are there any good doctors left? I don't want to be cynical. Are there people who just still haven't seen? Do they just not get what the CPSO is really about, or the other regulatory bodies, or are they just afraid? What's your assessment?
It's going to be a mixture of all of the above that you mentioned. And I think when we take it back, I want to take it back a little bit further back when the type of personalities that goes into medicine, people need to realize. I always It was always told to us, the honest truth is the first day we were sitting in our kind of our orientation classes, we were told, remember, you are the cream of the cream, the smartest in your school. You were head boy and head girl, and you did all of these things. So really kind of just blowing you up a little bit. And I'm looking around me and I'm saying, well, I know there was at least 6 people in my school that was smarter than me. The real geeky types, they're not sitting in this class. This is not what they came to study. So people need to realize there's something in the whole medical field that from the beginning, you're told that you are smarter than most or almost everybody, and you are the pick of the pick. So that's the mindset that they go into. I always knew from the beginning, no, you are the disciplined one. You are the one that really do care about your academics. There is that. It takes a lot of studying to finish. Once again, you might have ambition, but you are always the compliant one. That's what you were in your school. You were the one that showed up. You did what you were supposed to do. So that's the mindset that they go into this training. They don't go into it challenging what they're being told from day one. They're there to be taught that you shut up until you're finished, because the people above you with the little white coats, they know better than you. So keep that in mind when you're working with any physician. There's always going to be a small subset that knew what was wrong with the system, but most of them come out of that idea of this is what it is, this is what it's been since 1902 or 1903, and we're not going to change it. But there are people that have started waking up to the limitations of the medical model that I've been taught, just because they've gotten to a point that they're so frustrated in their practices, because they know if they're honest, it's not serving them, they're not satisfied, and they're not helping their patients. They've realized that it's a sick care model. A lot of those people just do not have the energy and the courage to step outside of it and then basically come to the realization that I've put so much time and effort and money and debt into learning something that I know is probably a broken system anyway, and I'm not serving society, even though they went into it with maybe a good idea of really wanting to serve. So they're stuck in this paradigm because they don't have the energy to, after how many years in their practice, to step outside of it. Then there is a group that absolutely know what they're doing, is just a farce. It's just prescriptions after prescriptions. You're not helping anybody. You're not preventing anything. You're not saving anybody. But the money is just too good. The lifestyle is too good, and they're not going to give it up. So I think it's a little bit of all of these.
How do you build a life in a broken system? Well, you start with yourself. You build your 5 pillars of strength: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and financial, so that you are strong in the face of whatever comes. We all have a tendency to self sabotage in one area or another, but I'm here to tell you that it is not your fault. We are bombarded with programming designed to keep us weak, dependent, sick, and broke. And as someone who has been weak, dependent, sick, and broke, I can tell you that you do not have to stay there. As a certified self sabotage coach, I work with clients one on one to distinguish their unique sabotaging patterns and habits. And I teach you how to reprogram for success in any area of life. If you'd like to have a conversation to see if this is a fit for you, email me at michelle@gatheryourwits.com. And now back to some empowering programming.
In our membership, our K Wellness membership, we teach our members to say, remember, you are the only one that can hand over that power to somebody in a white coat. So that's where it should start and that's where it ends. It doesn't
I
matter
want
if that
to
person,
actually, sorry to
say again,
interrupt you, I want to
Nina?
actually explain what K wellness is so that people have that context. Because I mean, what I was hearing, even in what you were saying, is ultimately everything comes down to personal responsibility,
Absolutely.
because you don't know what kind of doctor you're getting.
Mhm.
And they're only going to feed you what they've been fed. So please explain K Wellness, how you came to that model, and more about it.
Absolutely. So the idea with we started K Wellness probably about 2.5 years now. So it's starting to gain some momentum, and we're finally with a model that I think we're able to expand on. But basically, the principles of it is it's a private membership association where members sign up to say, we want that second opinion. And that second opinion that we're going to get from these practitioners, I've got an amazing partner that is so well educated and so experienced. But the second opinion you're going to get from myself, as well as the other practitioner here and guest speakers that we bring in, is always going to be with honesty and integrity, because we're not playing by somebody's little boxes. We're in a private space where we're able to give you our honest opinion. But at the end of the day, the members are taught, educate yourself. That's where it starts. Educate yourself on how to get healthy, how to stay healthy, keep your family healthy, and it's not that complex. The medical model wants to make it seem complex because they hold the monopoly that way. Once you make something, people think that something is so complex that I can't even take a look at it, I have to outsource those decisions, then they've won the battle already. So people are educated to say these are simple things that you can do in your life to change what you're doing already to get to a healthier point and eventually learn how to advocate for yourself. So we've got people in our membership that have never had a family physician. They're not interested at all. They don't trust the model enough to ever want to step into a family practice office, which is fine. I understand where they're coming from. But then we have members that do have family physicians, and we teach them to say, use your family physician for the things that you know they're good at. Ordering x rays, ordering ultrasounds, writing your prescriptions. We can teach you how to get off of that prescriptions, obviously, but if that's not something you're interested, go and see them for your prescription. So it's once again having that knowledge to make the decision. So when you're stepping in to the private health model, you're stepping there in there with power to say, I know your limitations, but I also know what you can provide to me, because ultimately I am the client and I'm coming here expecting something, and I'm not leaving without getting that. So even if it's a referral to an x-ray or a specialist, and anything that's offered more than that, it just bounces off you to say, well, I know you're speaking from indoctrination. I don't have to fight with you about it. You're not going to convince your physician of anything, to be honest. As a patient, don't even try that concept of being on a pedestal and listening to a patient. It's not gonna work in that model. So don't even try. Don't waste your energy. But step in, get what you want out of it, and remain true to yourself. But if you want extra, come back to us, and we can provide you the extra.
Sorry, I'm laughing because you are describing my last doctor's appointment. Because
Perfect.
I decided, okay, I want one because I want blood tests. I want x-rays. I don't want your opinion. I just want my tests. And then I will
Exactly.
go to another practitioner that I trust. So I want to talk about the
Exactly.
different kinds of services that you provide, because I had the opportunity to just have a taste within your membership. And I know you're doing some very interesting things. So maybe you could go through the breadth of things that you provide.
Absolutely. So Michelle, first off, I think the membership is based on a community first. So we've got a platform where people can ask questions in a community chat. It's all private, so they have to sign a membership agreement before they step into that. And then there is bi-weekly Q&As where they can show up live and ask any medical question of myself as an integrative practitioner, as well as our holistic nutritionist with a bunch of extra training. So they can show up and ask their questions. So just there, I think there's a lot of value. A lot of people don't necessarily want to go to their family physician for all of these little things. They don't need to go to the emergency department, but they've got questions and they don't know what to trust or who to trust on when they're Googling as well. So they can do that. Then we've got a bunch of educational content on the platform. And then the second step is we've got access to all of the alternative testing that you don't necessarily even can get from your family physician. One of the ones that we've seen has made a massive difference in just getting people from a point of chronic illness to health is hair mineral analysis testing. It's been such a foundational part of some of our testing, some of our detox programs that we're running, and it basically gives us an overview of what has your nutritional value been in the last 3 months. What are you even absorbing? Is there mineral deficiencies, which a lot of things comes back to mineral deficiencies, and it's related to stress and hormones and all of that, as well as your heavy metal load. And all of that needs to be sorted out first before you start working on detox and getting the body back to health. Then we can do DNA genetic tests, not through 23andMe, through a laboratory that we trust. We know the person doing these tests, and they run tests to tell you how you can change your lifestyle. So then it becomes really personalized to say, yes, cold plunging might be good for the person next to me, but it's not good for me because my body is in a shutdown, hibernation, stress mode, and my genetics is probably going to make it that cold plunging is never going to be good for me. I'll do better by sitting in the hot tub next to the person doing the cold plunge. So it becomes so personalized. Then we do functional tasting as well. Functional tasting is basically when you think of life labs, what your family physician orders, they do maybe a TSH to see what your thyroid is. When you look at functional tasting, there's TH8, free T3, T4, thyroid antibodies, all of those extra things that gives you a little bit of an overview of what's really going on in the body. We also fall under the side that we don't just look at the piece of paper results, even though it's functional testing, because otherwise we fall into the same model to say we treat the results and we don't put it in context with what's going on in the person's body. But sometimes it gives you a little bit more information that was lacking in the picture that what you got out of the history. And then we've got amazing educational webinars we've done for more than a year and a half now. Some amazing webinars. We invite people as guests that speak on their expertise, so they're able to watch that as well. And we're now starting to expand into creating our own customized supplements that is based on the results that come back from, for example, your hair mineral analysis, that you're customizing your own supplements. It's not just a random supplement that you take from the shelf. So we're continually developing and learning, and it's been amazing because honestly, it's allowed me to instead of just fight against the system and keep my focus on just this battle. We're still in battle with the college, but it's allowed me to shift my energy. And I like educating, I like teaching, and that's part of, as a physician, that should be part of your role, is teaching. And it's allowed us to create this platform where I can teach, but I can also learn. And that's the beauty of it. Once you create a community where people feel safe enough to share what they have learned, what they've learned from their grandmother, what they grew up with, it allows us to say, oh, wow, all of these ancient wisdoms. And I'm a digger. I like to go read up and just hoard information. So then we go down rabbit holes to say, oh, wow, this is actually something of value. And we do a deep dive and bring it into the program. So it's been amazing. We're hoping to expand it. Obviously, in Canada, the sense of paying for certain things is not really there yet. In the US, it's much easier. They understand paying for their health. So at this moment, though, we have some international members as well. So we're hoping to expand, because I think it has made a difference in a lot of people's lives already.
Wow. Okay. So I have to tell you, I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I have to get back to my membership. I'm listening to you going, oh my God, and it's going to customize supplements, because I have been through so many years. As you know, I had chronic fatigue for many, many years, and I've been experiencing fatigue again. And there's so much about what you just said that it resonates, and it's so right. I mean, education and even just the whole idea of, I remember in filling out the consent form, that you are committing to taking personal responsibility for your health. I mean,
Absolutely.
no doctor's going to ask you to do that, right? They don't even, if I was being cynical, want you to take personal responsibility for your health, but you're actually saying, oh, no, this is up to me. And then to have access to all this information. Okay, so I got to get back on that.
We're there when you're ready. I know you've had a busy time, but we're not going anywhere.
Wonderful. So this service is available really to anybody, anywhere, because
Absolutely.
it's online.
Absolutely. Everything's virtual. And I think that is what has made it amazing, because the accessibility, a lot of the freedom fighters are very resistant to technology, which I understand. There's a sense of suspicion. But what we also need to realize is, when we're so resistant to technology, that we ended up putting ourselves in our own prison. So what we've done is we've harnessed that technology to say, what can we create online? A lot of things that can happen virtually. You don't have to be in a physical office. And a lot of times with the home monitoring things that we've got now, I do bioenergetics where I can look at your blood work from anywhere in the world. I know it sounds strange, but it's all quantum physics. So there's been so many innovative things out there. Once you're willing to just open up your mind to say, what I've been told is not the whole picture, there's so much more, it allows us to create something that you really can be anywhere in the world and be part of this membership. We do have a part where we're referring to nurse practitioners. If people don't have family physicians, we can refer them to a nurse practitioner that can still provide all of these services online, that's now in the public sphere. So we're just allied with a bunch of these people, and I'm now looking to add some nurse practitioners in other provinces. We've got one in Ontario, but eventually we want to move away a little bit from that as well, because we do feel that what we can offer is moving further away from being the gateway to just back into the public health. But at this moment, we do have a nurse practitioner that is able to provide these services in Ontario only. But yeah, it's a whole paradigm shift in how we can do this. And we've just, I think about it's probably 6 months ago now, we launched our first program, which we called Cellular Reboot. And it was an 8-week program where you sign up. The program is free. There's certain specifications. You need to order something for you to be part of this program, but it teaches you everything from nutrition to sleeping, circadian rhythms, sun gazing throughout this. And you've got weekly access to live Q&As as part of this program. And we've had such amazing feedback from just this program, because then you're bringing in that community feeling as well as the accountability. So we're hoping to expand on programs. I'm working on a bioenergetic program at this moment. And one of my loves is the myofascial system with sports medicine and athletes. So we're now working in work in basically focusing on high performance athletes and just high performance individuals that know that they're so functional and they're so ambitious, but their health isn't what it should be. And there's ways that we can just upgrade their experience of wellness as well. So it's an exciting time for sure.
Wow, so much I love about what you said. Not the least of which is the whole quantum physics based healing. I'm experimenting with some of that myself. I mean, what we're learning, even as a layperson who is so not a science person, as a layperson, I understand that the whole notion that the observer causes the material reality, so
Absolutely.
what does that mean in terms of my health? What are the consequences? What can I do? So that's a whole other conversation that can be
Absolutely.
had. But I really, what I'm pointing to is I love that you are continuing to be on the leading edge. Like you're using what happened as this opportunity to expand probably beyond you ever would have
Absolutely.
expanded. I This has been my kind of central theme for the last
Mhm.
couple of years, which is I believe that this time, this circumstance is our greatest opportunity. What do you see? How do you encourage that in your children? How do we expand that sense of
Mhm.
what's possible?
Absolutely. Yes, Michelle, I think a lot of people have been so stuck in the frequency, what do you want to call it, frequency, energy that we've been pulled into in the last few years, where if you're not fighting against something, you really don't know what to do with your life. And I think for probably a lot of your type of listeners, realizing that whatever you put your energy into, you're feeding that as well. So shifting from feeding something negative and putting it into positive. We've got children, and at the end of the day, especially out of our faith, it's all about building a legacy. And we all have our own unique purpose on this earth. And I do think this has pushed me to that next level of comfort of speaking. I did not like public speaking at all. And it's pushed you to develop skills. It's pushed you to develop, to teach, all of these things. And it's gotten me to that next fact of growth. But eventually, it is, what do you leave for your children? What do you leave for the next generation? And our world is still in turmoil. I mean, anybody that is online enough knows that everything is so uncertain still. Yes, there's so much positive happening. I mean, even just down south, there's a lot of positive that I think that has happened. Doesn't matter which side of the political divide or how you see it. There's so many rabbit holes that you can go into, but more positive has happened in the last 6 months. But in the bigger picture, we still have a lot of work to recover from where we were heading, and I don't think the battle is over. I think eventually it's going to come back to families, fathers and mothers, making sure that they take accountability for their families. And that's where my husband plays a big role. He teaches men how to be men again, how to step into that power where you're not realizing it's not a toxic masculinity. You were created with a specific certain set of strengths, and same for me. I was created as a woman with certain strengths that I need to leverage. And it's getting back to this, basically the old way of viewing um, the collaboration between men and women in families. And part of the secret, and I mean, this can be controversial for a lot of people, part of my secret and my blessing in the last few years is that I am part of a plural relationship. So I have a sister wife, and that has allowed me to really step into my purpose, because I have no idea, in all honesty, apart from our Heavenly Father's blessings, I have no idea how we would have survived the last few years if it was not for the fact that I had Aubrey and Jolene at home, that you could step out and do whatever you're supposed to do, go onto that stage, speak your truth, but you knew you always had a safe space to return to. And there were two people at home that loved you and supported you all the way. And our children have that as well. But stepping back from that, I think every single family just need to make sure that they know what path they are on. It doesn't matter what is happening in the province. It doesn't matter if Alberta is going to go for independence. Yes, we would love that. Obviously, I'm now an Albertan. But eventually it doesn't really make a difference if we all just focus on what we were supposed to be doing on this earth. What is our internal purpose? What is our connection with our creator? Whatever spiritual access way you do that, and then start working in our communities. But you cannot work in a community if you don't work on the families. And I think that's one of the things that was one of the steps that was skipped throughout this last couple of years, because it was just we were forming these freedom fighter communities because we had to, and we had to find a safe space, and we had to fight against this big dragon. But a lot of these things started falling apart because people in these communities realized we don't always have the same values, we don't always have the same ethics. And bring it back into the families. Now it's families starting to align with the same values. And that's, at the end of the day, that is what forms a community, not a group that formed because we're fighting against something.
Oh, I'm so grateful to you for sharing all of that, particularly your personal life. One of the things I admire most about you is the courage of your convictions. You know, I want to give you the last word, but I just have to ask you, from where does that come? How do you encourage it? I guess that's the question.
Mm-hmm. I've been asked this before, Michelle, and I think it's a discussion we have in our family, obviously, a lot, because people need to realize, as a plural family, you're not part of any group. It's taboo, it's looked down upon, it's frowned upon out of the conservative Bible believer grouping that you're living in sin, but it's also out of the liberal polyamorous open marriages group. You are so conservative, and we honor the headship and the patriarchy. I mean, that word has been such a triggering word for so many years. We want to establish true biblical honest patriarchy that serves a community and that next generation. So we understand that on so many of these issues, we totally stand against the group. And I don't know if it's part of our culture. I think in the Boer culture, it's something that's ingrained in our genetics, that the principles it was always something that they were willing to die for. I mean, it's told over and over in our history. And then I think it comes down to a personality type as well. So I don't want people, because it's always that comparison with what other people are doing. I don't want that to become that this is the ultimate way of living. I was created for a certain purpose, so I needed to have a certain personality that fits with that. Doesn't mean everybody needs to do that, but there's a certain amount of people that doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 15 or 25 or 35 or 55. They do not care about being part of the group. They don't find the safety in conforming what the group thinks. They're willing to look at things for themselves and say, but this is the right decision. Doesn't matter if it's not the right decision for everybody, but the truth is, and I think that's the biggest thing, that in our family, it's all about standing up for the truth. But for you to be able to stand up for the truth, you need to be honest enough with yourself to say, are you objective? Are you speaking from your own indoctrination? You need to break away from religion, from cultural indoctrination, so that you can actually examine the truth. And the polygyny aspect has been a big part of that, to say we're breaking away from everything that we've been told as well, to say, no, this isn't the right thing. And that is the same thing that's happened in the medical field. So I find that people would think we're courageous. I don't know if we're courageous. I think it's just how we were created to be, because we have that certain purpose in what we were supposed to be telling in the last few years. We do raise our children, obviously, to have that same aspect, to say it's not about just fitting in with the group. It's about making sure that you know what you believe in. Really go through what you believe in. Don't just reverberate what you've been told. Even from us, we challenge them to say, what we're telling you, ask us questions. If you feel like we're telling you the wrong thing, ask us. Always do it with respect, because we have some ears on you, but don't just take what we're telling you. Ask us, but then willing to be excluded from the group for what you're believing, I think starts from a very young age, because it does take some courage, especially if you're younger. Once you reach an older age, I think a lot of people, they really don't care anymore. But it's when you're young enough and you have the energy to try to make a difference, that's when it might seem from the outside that it takes a little bit of courage. And eventually, in all honesty, material things do not mean anything to us. And I think that's where people get caught up in your houses and your cars and your clothes and all of the things that you need to maintain, because there's a certain expectation for you to fall part of the group, for you to just maintain that. Once you break away from material things, there's a freedom that comes into it to say, I really don't have anything to lose, and whatever I can lose is of no value to me anyway. It's not eternal value.
I'm so grateful for you,
Thank you,
for who
Michelle.
you are, for your honesty, for your intelligence, for your, maybe it's bravery, maybe it's just inherent in you to, speak your mind. Is there anything that you want to say, that you wanted to communicate today? I want to give you a chance to have the last word.
No, I think we've covered it all. I'm just grateful for this opportunity. The couple of times we've met in person, we loved just chatting, and there's a resonation of frequencies for sure. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. And I know you're getting towards the end of your podcast series and all of that. And I know that you've made a difference in people's life as well. I've seen you interact with others, and you've got such a bright spirit and soul that you exude. So whatever you do after this, I just support you. And yes, you're part of K Wellness. So we would love to have you back in that sense. And anybody that has questions on K Wellness, they can go to the website www.key2wellness.ca, and there's a contact us little page there if they've got questions before they sign up. If not, a lot of the information is on there, and we would love to have you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Michelle.
so much.
Bye.
Bye.
One of the gifts of the past 5 years has been meeting people with hugely diverse backgrounds, cultures, education, and beliefs. I held very different political and religious views from many people whom I now call friends. I had no understanding or real appreciation for their perspective on the world or life itself. But the COVID operation, for all its nefarious intentions, cracked open a world of possibilities for so many of us. Probably like you, I knew there were places where corruption existed, of course. But like most people, I saw it on the other side, wherever you might draw that line, with politics, religion, geography, and even unimaginably just a decade ago, with our medical choices. Part of our human knee jerk, our subconscious protective mechanism, is to otherize, to guard against those who are different, unknown, and therefore a potential threat. But new ideas, new ways of thinking and seeing are not a threat to anything other than our egos. The fear that drives us to otherize is an illusion often brought about by a barrage of clickbait, fear porn, and divisive conversation, hijacking our amygdala, yanking us away from our prefrontal cortex and our ability to think and to discern. With the propaganda war waged against us during COVID, it's understandable that so many people lost their ability to use critical thinking. I've used this platform to try and understand why some people were able to keep theirs intact. Having critical thinking and value determination as a core principle practiced daily is one reason that Dr. Rochagné Kilian was not taken in by the fear-mongering. And that is my first takeaway from this juicy conversation with the good doctor. We can't expect to see and discern if we are not rigorously putting our beliefs and values to the test, and not just once. Many people have seen newly in the past 5 years, but now rigidly hold new righteous opinions. Until and unless we continue to examine our thoughts and beliefs, to let go of ideology and practice critical thinking on an ongoing basis, we will repeat the same patterns that got us into this us versus them paradigm, that put us on the brink of self-destruction. That is my second takeaway. Finally, there's Rochagné's disarming combination of soft-spoken calm and frank honesty. In a sea of unsocial media and divide and conquer tactics, attack and defense, we can learn from those who possess this quiet strength. We can learn to listen, discern, and even disagree without doing battle. And in the process, become better for it, allowing reason and ethics to rule rather than reaction and emotion. What is wanted and needed at this pivotal time in history is to birth the world newly. When we lead a life trued up to our values, we become creators of our reality rather than mere reactors. Instead of focusing on the injustice of the unwarranted CPSO attacks and the loss of her income and a career built on excellence, Dr. Rochagné Kilian is building back better. She is creating a whole new paradigm of health that will benefit many people and personally continue to fuel and inspire her love of learning. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and that it has perhaps provoked new thinking, new openings for action, or new inspiration to true up to what matters most to you. This is the last episode of Trued Up, at least for the foreseeable future. I invite you to go back and watch all our previous episodes to find inspiration, not just from my honored guests, but from whatever you see in them that you recognize in yourself. At this time in history, we can succumb to hopelessness, fear, and further division, or we can transmute our pain and fuel our purpose. I thank you for who you are being in the world. Stay true to yourself, and remember that we are the ones we've been waiting for.